NFL football is right around the corner, but college football is actually coming sooner. So I'm going to take this opportunity to drop my college football Washington Commanders watch list. And we only have 2 players that come from the same school. That and more on this episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderGameDay.com. Here with you every Monday through Friday. Greatly appreciate you coming through today. Every dayers appreciate you for coming through every single day. This is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this episode. On this episode, we're going to dive into my personal watch list for the upcoming college football season as we get ready for live football to come back just over a month from now. And yes, this is inspired by the release of EA College Sports Football 25 because I've got college football on the brain. I've been wanting to put out a college football watch list anyway. With training camp coming up next week, figured this is as good a time as any. And we're going to start off with our day one potential targets. And again, right now, saying anybody's a day one target is a little bit premature, but there are some day one projections out there. Coach Nick Saban might have retired, but one of his proteges or 2 of his proteges are actually on our list. None of them day one guys, but we do have Alabama players. Repeating on this list, but that is the only school that's got more than one prospect. Every other prospect is coming from a different college. I did that on purpose because I can't cover every school, can't cover every single player. And no, these are not the only good players. So if your favorite player at a position is not on this list, please don't take it as a slight towards that player. These are just guys that I'm going into the college football season specifically watching with a Washington Commanders eye on them. If you want to discuss any of that, anything else Washington Commanders related, or if you've got questions you need answers, all you have to do is text me. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders today. Become a Locked On Commanders insider, and from there you can text me your news, your analysis, your opinions, your questions. I'll text you back. We'll have a lot of fun conversations. You'll also get bonus content, inside information, and live text from games, practices, press conferences, all kinds of good stuff going on. No downloads, no hashtags, no apps, no filters, none of that junk. You just text me, I text you. We have a good time. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We've got 2 Alabama players on this list, like I said, and we know how Washington has a deep and a pretty successful relationship with the Alabama Crimson Tide, and there's a connection between head coach Dan Quinn and Nick Saban. So even though Nick Saban has retired, a lot of Nick Saban recruited players are still there in Alabama, so that connection could still live on. So 2 Alabama Crimson Tide players on my college football watch list, but the rest of those guys are coming from different schools, and we're not even starting with the Alabama guys up top, so this is not an Alabama Crimson Tide steered episode. There's a lot of representation here, and if I can't prove to you how much different representation there is, I'm a born and raised Buckeye fan, so I'm an Ohio State fan, and we've got a Michigan Wolverine near the top of this list. I graduated college from Arizona State, so I'm a Sun Devil guy, and an Arizona Wildcat is the number 1 prospect on this watch list. So, and again, these rankings are very loose, but we are going top to bottom. We're going kind of the guy that I'm most excited to watch this season from a Washington Commanders view all the way down to the bottom. And we're going to start with Arizona Wildcat receiver Tet McMillan. And so, again, you can't call me biased because I've got him. I don't even have any Sun Devils on here because I couldn't force it. 6'5", Tet McMillan. Ted Aroa is his first name. Tet McMillan is what everybody calls him. 6'5", looks a lot like Mike Evans on tape. And if there's a little bit of bias, maybe that's what it is. I've covered the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a long time. I've seen Mike Evans. I've covered Mike Evans for every year but one. His rookie season is the only season I wasn't covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for some sort of media outlet. But I've gotten to cover Mike Evans for pretty much his entire career. And when you look at the Washington Commanders roster, they could use a Mike Evans type of dude. And Jane Daniels could use a Mike Evans type of dude going on and moving into his second year in the National Football League, as it were. He's got strong hands, lines up across the formation. You'll see the Wildcats use him on the perimeter. You'll see them use McMillan in screens. You'll see them use him in the slot. There's really not a lot that Tet McMillan isn't doing. Short passes, intermediate passes over the middle, on the perimeter, deep balls, all kinds of stuff. Tet McMillan certainly a weapon that, if he wasn't playing for Arizona, to be quite honest with you, then he'd be getting a lot more attention on a national landscape, but certainly could look to do that this coming season for the Wildcats. So that's how we're kicking that off. Number one is my alma mater's rival. We're going there. So again, a lot of fun here. Cornerback. My next player up is a corner back. And yes, some of these are listed in like team priorities, right? Obviously, I think most people say left tackle or even right tackle, offensive tackle, just in general, probably the team's biggest need. And no, that's not my number one player position, but we are getting there very soon. But cornerback is the next position that I'm watching. Will Johnson out of Michigan. So again, I'm a born and raised Ohio State guy. And here we got Mike Sanders still coming in from Michigan. And now I'm looking to add Will Johnson, another secondary player from that awesome Wolverines defense. 6'2". The dude has got length, so he's built 6'2". But I'll tell you right now, you turn on the tape, he looks longer than 6'2". I don't know what his wingspan is exactly, but dude's got long limbs. He's got really good ball skills. He's a very willing run defender. Not the most technical run defender, right? Doesn't necessarily squat and shoulder and all that stuff. He likes to throw his body at people's ankles. He likes to kind of like launch himself into people's shoulders, things like that. But he's a very willing and tough run defender. He's effective in man and zone coverage, and he's got very strong instincts. When you turn on Michigan Wolverines tape, you can see those instincts really shine. Honestly, just Google Will Johnson, Michigan Wolverine highlights, and you'll see a lot of what I'm talking about here. Tet McMillan as well. Look at his highlight reel, and I'm sure you're going to see a lot of Mike Evans-esque type of play out of him as well. So if the Washington Commanders were to target either of those guys in round one of 2025, that's where they're kind of projected to be right now. Again, projections that right now in the NFL draft, very grain of saltish. Right next by this time, in next year and actually in actual April, some of these guys may not be all the way up there. We'll see how they do, but that's why we call it a watch list, right? Offensive tackle. We're finally in the offensive tackle position. And yes, I know there's a young man from Texas getting a lot of burn, deserves a lot of attention, but I got to go Will Campbell out of LSU. He's a left tackle. He's a 6'6", massive human being. Strength is on full display anytime you watch him play. He's very aggressive in his blocking, works from the first to second level a lot better than you would think a dude his size would. Doesn't get caught reaching very often, which is one of my favorite things. I hate when I see offensive linemen just kind of lunge out there and try to reach out and touch a defender. So I like that he doesn't get caught reaching all that often. Very comfortable playing with mobile quarterback. Obviously, just got done playing with Jaden Daniels in Jaden's final college year. LSU also used Will Campbell, rather. Will Johnson, the corner, Will Campbell, the tackle. LSU will use Will Campbell as well inside, actually, in some goal line sets last year. So that's a very interesting way of using a guy as big as he is. So depending on how Brandon Coleman develops this year, depending on the job that Cornelius Lucas does, depending on the future of Andrew Wiley at the right side. And again, Will Campbell's a left tackle at LSU right now, but you could move him over to the right side, and, if you need to, or move Brandon Campbell to the right side, plug Will Campbell in to the left side. So we talked about that as well in previous episodes. So Will Campbell, definitely for a day one projected offensive tackle in the 2025 NFL draft that I'm going to be watching this coming college football season. Edge rusher. We're going to end our day one, quote unquote, target list with edge rusher James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. Dude is 6'5", 242, built a lot like Dorrance Armstrong. Never seen him in person, so this is just me looking at the tape and saying, who does he remind me of? He reminds me dimensionally of Dorrance Armstrong Jr. Constant motor. Dude just never stops moving his feet, never stops trying to get to the quarterback or the ball carrier, wherever it is. Quick outside in move set. The dude's got a juke move, a drop step that would make point guards in the NBA jealous. He's got the speed to win off the ball, plays right and left side at Tennessee, stands up, or he has his hand down. So he's a very versatile player, and he's a very solid diagnostician. I think that's how you say that. He diagnoses plays very, very well. I saw a lot of clips of James Pierce Jr. where the opponent is trying to lure him in for a screen, or they're trying to roll his way, or they're trying to do whatever. And he's very, very good at picking up those signals, very good at reading what the offense is trying to do and reacting accordingly. So those are our 4 current day one projected players. The rest of this watch list, they're not really day one projected guys because they're not positions that I foresee at this time the Washington Commanders probably having day one targets on. But you could see this Washington Commanders team target a receiver, a corner, an offensive tackle, or an edge rusher all in day one of next year. Obviously, you're not going to get all 4 of those guys next year, but any of those 4 positions, you could potentially see the Commanders target on day one of next year's NFL draft. So that's why I put those 4 groups up there. The rest of these groups I view as most likely day 2 or later projected target spots for the Washington Commanders draft board. So that's why we're going to separate them there. So we will be back with the rest of our watch list coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. And if you're like a lot of people out there, you might compare your life to the lives of other people from time to time, even if it's only every once in a while. It's a very natural thing to compare your life to the life of other people. Social media plays a big part in that because we're all out there showing our vacation photos, showing our suntan photos, showing our new car photos. We're not really showing the dirty dishes photos. We're not showing the argument we just had with the loved one photos, right? We're not really doing that. So sometimes other people's lives look a lot better than our own. And if you do that, if you do it too often, especially, it can keep you from seeing all the positivity going on in your own life. Bottom line is comparison can be a thief of joy, and it's easy to fall in love and even envy other people's lives. Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have so you can start living your best life. And it's helpful for learning positive coping skills, learning how to set boundaries, and it empowers you to be the best version of yourself. So stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/locked on today to get 10% off your first month. It's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. Wide receiver Ted McMillan out of Arizona, cornerback Will Johnson out of Michigan, offensive tackle Will Campbell out of LSU, and edge rusher James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee started off our 2024-2025 offensive or Washington Commanders college football watch list here on today's episode. We're going to continue our watch list moving forward. Thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. Every day, thanks for coming through today as you do every other day. We will be back tomorrow with a mailbag, off-season mailbag, dead period, pre-training camp mailbag episode. So make sure you come back for that. If you are missing sports between that time and this time, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every single day, all streaming 24/7 on YouTube for free or for free on the Amazon Fire TV channels app, all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So as we continue here, we're now looking at prospects that are not currently projected to be day one guys, and some of these are borderline day two, day one guys. So certainly could be looked at as day one guys. You might see a too early mock draft out there where they're a day one guy, and that's certainly possible and potentially going to happen, in the next 9 months or so as these guys continue. And you will notice if you go through this list that some of these guys are underclassmen, so there's no guarantee that they will be actually in the NFL draft in 2025. They're not all seniors, but certainly everybody on this list is draft eligible for 2025. I mentioned at the top, we've got 2 Alabama players. Every other player comes from a school that only gets listed one time in this list, and I kind of did that on purpose. I wanted to diversify this list as much as possible, but I did allow myself to have 2 Alabama players. The first of them is the very first name on this part of the list, and that is guard Tyler Booker out of Alabama. Dude is 6'5", 352 pounds. He's a left guard at Alabama, only allowed 2.5 sacks last year. He plays with a very strong base. He gets his butt really low to anchor down when he's going up against pressure. He's an effective puller that can drive defenders off the line when he comes through the hole. He is a catch blocker and pass pro at times, but he's strong at the point of impact when the pass rusher is coming into him. Always looking to work in zone pass pro. Very smart, very heady offensive lineman. So Tyler Booker, our first Alabama player on this list. We're moving next into the free safety position. So you notice we're not just going offense, defense, whatever. We're kind of just putting him in kind of a pecking order of my kind of the guy I'm most excited about at this point in time in the college football season, which is obviously in the preseason. And we're looking at free safety Kevin Winston out of Penn State. And I'm labeling him the free safety. He's basically a safety. For Penn State, he does play a good amount of box snaps. He plays a good amount of coverage snaps, but I'm calling him a free safety in the NFL just from what I've seen of him so far. That could obviously change in the coming months, but he's 6'2", 206 pounds, so a little bit of a slight frame. He's aggressive. He's got good ball skills, mostly passes defense that I'm seeing on tape. Good length. He's got good pursuit on screen plays. His run support is very strong. Special teams contributor. And again, like I said, he plays in the box at times for Penn State. He also plays deep coverage as well. So when you're out there watching Penn State football, keep an eye on Kevin Winston. When you're watching Ohio State football, because you knew I had to get a Buckeye in there, here's a pretty good one. Running back Travion Henderson, 5'10", 208 pounds, very Austin Eckler-esque, right? I'm not saying he's a carbon copy of Austin Eckler, but there are a lot of similarities between Austin Eckler's game and Travion Henderson's game. I think Travion Henderson, a little bit more stout, a little bit more stacked, a little bit more of a powerful type of running back. Mostly runs on the edge. He's got underrated athleticism, follows blocks really well, good vision, find the hole, get through the hole, good balance, and I think decent speed. He's not a burner. I don't think he's going to win any track meets, but definitely good speed and a capable receiver. Ohio State doesn't necessarily ask him to receive or catch the ball a whole lot, but when they do, he's certainly capable. I've seen him run some wheel routes and track the ball really well over the shoulder and make a catch very nicely. So running back Travion Henderson out of Ohio State getting in there on the list. Going back to the SEC with tight end Oscar Delp out of Georgia. Oscar Delp, 6'5", 245 pounds, receiving type tight end. He can play split off the line of scrimmage or split away from the offensive line rather, or in line. He's got good ball skills. He's a very energetic blocker, which is a nice way of saying not the greatest blocker, but he puts a lot of effort into it. Certainly something that he'll have to get better at if this is last year in college and then certainly in the NFL. Very quarterback friendly. Something I noticed on his tape is he knows how to get into open space, turn his jersey number towards the quarterback, make himself available very often. I think Carson Beck probably really appreciates that about him and is going to take advantage of that this year. Obviously, Carson Beck, the quarterback in Georgia, that some people have as a Heisman Trophy candidate. Linebacker, I'm looking at Barrett Carter out of Clemson, 6'1", 230 pounds. He's a very patient attacker, on-field communicator. Looks like very, very strong communicator on the field, strong tackler, very comfortable in zone coverage. He clears blocks well and navigates through traffic. And sometimes as an off-ball linebacker, that's kind of like the hardest part of doing it. So seeing a guy like Barrett Carter join this staff or join this room potentially next offseason, we don't know what the future holds for Bobby Wagner. Is this his last year playing? Is he going to want to come back next year? All those things. Frankie Louvu, you expect to kind of take that step forward. Jamin Davis may not be around, so they might need to find a Jamin Davis, Micah Parsons type of edge linebacker to throw in there. I'm not saying Barrett Carter is that guy, but Barrett Carter is certainly someone you can see join this room. And in a room of Frankie Louvu, Barrett Carter, Jordan McGee, Anthony Pittman, whoever else joins the crew, certainly, you could have a lot worse. Quarterback. We are looking at a quarterback on this watch list. Like I said, trying to address every position we possibly can. Not a first round guy, not even a second round guy. I don't know if he'll necessarily be a third round guy, although again, it's early. So by the time we actually get to April, somebody out there might be like, man, you want the Commanders to take a first round quarterback, Brady Cook. You're absolutely crazy. And I would be. But right now, Brady Cook not expected to be a first round quarterback. Quarterback out of Missouri, 6'2", 205 pounds, athletic enough. Here's what I'll tell you. Mizzou uses him as a runner. They do, and he does fairly well. I don't think in the NFL he's a running quarterback. I don't think you're going to call him a mobile quarterback in the National Football League, but he is going to have some athleticism to threaten defenses, and they're going to have to kind of account for that, which is good. Deep ball is great. His arm is amazing. He's got a very good arm. Watch highlight. Just go turn on Brady Cook highlights and watch this dude's arm. He's got quite an arm. Good touch when he needs it. Knows how to layer the football. Stands tall, climbs the pocket. Not a lot of progressions in Missouri's offense or for him that I've seen, which is a very big knock on college quarterbacks. So you would like to see progression a little bit more. But look, you can't blame the kid if he doesn't need to progress. Why go through the progressions, right? So Brady Cook, quarterback out of Missouri, he's our watch list candidate for the Washington Commanders. Again, you're not talking day one. You're not even necessarily talking day two. But given the guy's skill set, if Missouri can make some noise in the SEC, maybe Brady Cook ups his status enough that he's not going to be considered by the Washington Commanders. We got four more names to talk about, wrapping up our 2025 college football watch list for the Washington Commanders. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Game Time, and Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which means that you can get Major League Baseball tickets faster and easier with Game Time. And the prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer that it gets to the first pitch. They've got killer last minute deals that'll save you up to 60%. All-in prices that tell you the entire price before you make it to checkout. Views from your seat so you know how you're going to look at the ball field. Or if you're looking for concert tickets, you're going to know how the venue looks before you ever get in there, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying your Major League Baseball tickets. The Washington Nationals still on the road. Don't come home again until July 19th against the Cincinnati Reds. If you want to go see that game, you can do it for as little as $18. So take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create your account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Wrapping up this episode of Locked On Commanders, wrapping up our 2025 college football watch list through the Washington Commanders lens. These are players that I think could fit the Washington Commanders scheme, what we expect the Washington Commanders scheme to look like, position group needs that they might have to fill. And that's basically how we've done this thing. We've listed this thing from some of the biggest needs, right? Wide receivers, not the biggest need for the Washington Commanders, but your day one prospect on this list, wide receiver, cornerback, tackle, edge. I think those are kind of the four most important or biggest question marks on the roster right now. And then your day two, day three targets, mostly day two targets, but your next batch of targets basically fitting team needs that are not as important as those other ones. And we're going to wrap it up here. We got a defensive lineman, an interior defensive lineman, strong safety, center, and a kicker. And we're going to pick it up with defensive lineman Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss by way of Texas A&M. So if you're an Ole Miss fan, you don't know who this guy is, it's because he just transferred to your school this season, and you're going to find out who he is. 6'4", 290 pounds again. Was at Texas A&M before transferring to Ole Miss this offseason. He engages and drives solo blocks very well. He's very effective at splitting double teams. He's got a good motor, solid tackler, good bend when working around blockers, which is impressive to see for an interior defensive lineman. He'd be a good guy. We don't know what the future holds for Jonathan Allen, even Deron Payne, although I think Deron Payne, 2025 is probably pretty solid. Jonathan Allen, we don't know what the future necessarily holds for him. So if the Washington Commanders go looking for another defensive lineman to add to this group, we don't know what the future holds for Fedarian Mathis, John Ridgway, Benning Posai. He could be a guy, Walter Nolan, that they look to add to that group, added to Johnny Newton as well. Strong safety. This is actually one of my favorite players on this list that I'm really looking forward to seeing. And perhaps they could be more strong safety needy than free safety needy. So I could have maybe flipped them. But I'm looking at Hunter Wohler out of Wisconsin. And again, I'm calling him a strong safety right now. By the time we get to the NFL draft next year, maybe he's looked at as a free safety. I don't know, but I just wanted to find a guy that I thought could bring some thump, right? 6'2", 215 pounds out of Wisconsin. Good ball skills. He's a little small for a typical Quinn/Joe Witt Jr. safety, strong safety, but not overly small. Good edge blitzer, tackler, high energy dude, leader on the team in Wisconsin. Wouldn't mind seeing him on the Washington Commanders roster this time next year at all. Center, looking at John Monheim out of USC, 6'5", 295 pounds, another dancing bear type, versatile lineman who's got experience at tackle, he's got experience at guard, and then obviously experience at center. He is the number one center in the 2025 NFL draft to a lot of people. So who knows, by the time he actually gets to April, perhaps he's too high for the Washington Commanders to look at. But if they're looking to add some depth behind Tyler Biadasz, and maybe they're looking to move Ricky Stromberg to guard, Jonah Monheim, certainly someone to keep an eye on. And he can move to guard if you really need him to as well. And then we're wrapping it up with our final Alabama player of this list, our only double dip, the only school we went to twice, Alabama Crimson Tide, kicker out of Alabama. Don't have a lot of evaluation for you. 88% field goals, good kicker, looks like a good kicker. Thumbs up, Will Reichard, Alabama. I'm not trying to go out here. I have even less to evaluate on a punter, certainly not a long snapper. So we're going to wrap it up with the kicker there. So you got a lot of names here. Again, we'll kind of run down it real quick. Wide receiver, Tet McMillan out of Arizona. Cornerback, Will Johnson out of Michigan. Tackle, Will Campbell out of LSU. Edge rusher, James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee. Guard, Tyler Booker out of Alabama. Free safety, Kevin Winston out of Penn State. Running back, Travion Henderson out of Ohio State. Tight end, Oscar Delp out of Georgia. Linebacker, Barrett Carter out of Clemson. Quarterback, Brady Cook out of Missouri. Defensive lineman, Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. Strong safety, Hunter Wohler out of Wisconsin. Center, Jonah. Why do I keep calling him John? Center, Jonah Monheim out of USC. Kicker, Will Reichard out of Alabama. That's going to wrap up today's episode. Our next episode will be a mailbag episode. So if you've got questions that you want to submit, go ahead and submit them in the YouTube comment section or text me directly. Become a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders. Don't forget to also check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live streaming sports channel on YouTube. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, every dayers. Thanks for coming through like you do. Till we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind. If you're playing EA College Football 25 like I am on Monday afternoon, enjoy it. You waited a long time for it. Go out there, kill it. And until we speak again, be safe, be kind. We'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.